All right, first time trying this, so let's see how it goes. Full run through of the workout, maybe a little bit of edits to silence some of my screams as I'm doing this workout. But we're going to start with the single leg squat. I've just done a quick 5-minute warm up to get the hips loose because I've been sitting down for a while. You don't necessarily need a warm up for these max effort force negative reps. And I'll explain in a separate video as to why. But if you have been sitting down for a while, like most of us do with our desk jobs anyway, then I would recommend a 5-10 minute warm up, and I've probably got it in your program already. But when it comes to the single leg squat, like all of these kind of gold standard exercises, the 7 gold standard exercises we have, that's 6, that's 7. So the 7 gold standard exercises we have, we want to scale it down to our level, meaning that I'm not asking all of you to be able to do a perfect single leg squat with an additional 75% of your body weight on your back. We take the single leg squat and we scale it down to whatever your current level of ability is. And we've got a number of different ways of doing that. The first thing is going to be to use a ramp or like a weight plate underneath. Because often what we find when coming into the squat and trying to improve our squat is the thing that can hold us back is our ankle mobility. So if we just raise the heel a little bit, that allows us to get further into our squat position, our knee flexion, whereas here you can sometimes hit a bit of a wall, and that means we start to come forward. We might put too much load in the lower back, for example, and it's just not necessarily a bad position to be in here, because we're like that whenever we're picking something up or whatever. It's just a lot more inefficient. And for the single leg squat, we want efficiency. So helping you by raising that heel is probably a good place to start if we're just starting out with these exercises. The other thing is how, if you're not proficient in the single leg squat, how can we get you to the bottom position of that single leg squat at your current level of ability? And the way we do that is with support, manipulating the position of our body using our other limbs. So you're going to have something next to you. I'm going to use the back extension here as an example. And in the videos, you'll see me with the leg out in front. And then I think I've sent some of you the other videos. But what we can actually do at the beginning stage is actually bend down knee and take the foot behind. Because what this is going to do is allow us to come to the bottom position, but with our opposite leg in like this kickstand position. So some of you will have done like a B stance squat before, where the focus is on this leg, but this leg is kind of our kickstand supporter. We're going to do exactly that. So you've got your hand on the wall or a bench or even a back extension for support. You've got this other leg in a kickstand position behind you for additional support. So then all we have to do is lower ourselves down into the squat, and all of you are going to be able to get to this position. And therefore all of you are able to move through the full range of motion of a squat. Now I reckon everyone in the group can do that with ease, coming down with support from the arm and then coming back up. And obviously what we want to be doing is pushing you to your maximum strength threshold, and therefore this just isn't going to cut it. So then how we start to scale it up to where your current level of strength is just by assessing each level at a time and saying to ourselves, can I do that without feeling like I'm using my maximum strength capacity in the single leg squat? i.e., am I going absolutely all out here, or do I have a little bit reserved in the tank? And if the answer is that you have a little bit more reserved in the tank, you know you can start to scale it up. So then from here, what I'd say is the next level of difficulty is just by kind of having your hand here, having your leg here, but not necessarily using them for any kind of force generation. So they're there for support, but this leg is very much doing 90 to 95% of the work, driving you back up and down. Okay, then from there, obviously you could start to remove both, start to lower yourself down. But when you get to a position where you feel like you're going too quick through that lowering phase, you can either drop that foot behind you or grab your support here and kind of use that to be able to actively drive yourself back up through the lowering phase. Because remember, that's what we're trying to do in the lowering phase. It's a force negative, which means we're trying to come back up, but gravity is forcing us down. So if you're at this stage where you're going single leg squat, gravity is forcing you down. You physically can't squat yourself back up from this position. You're going to put your hand on the support, or you're going to put your foot down. That is going to help you out. And you should, with that support, be able to at least stay in a static position, and then gravity is going to work again, lowering you down, lowering you down. Maybe you need a little bit more to slow things down. You're trying to push back up as hard as you can, and then eventually the rep ends. Then you get to your second kind of checkpoint of the exercise, and you've got to say to yourself, from here, for the concentric phase, the way back up, what do I need to do in order to start the rep at my maximum capacity? So for almost everyone, for almost every exercise, you're going to be weaker in this portion of the movement, the upward phase, than you are in the lowering phase. And we've, hopefully you guys remember through one of the roundups, one of the first roundups we did, you're approximately 40%, depending on the exercise, 40% more strong through this lowering phase than you are on the way back up. Really having to push something away is technically a lot harder than fighting the resistance on the way down. So then from this position here, if I was able to lower myself down through the single leg squat all the way, boom, perfect. It's not necessarily the case that I could bring myself all the way up. In fact, it's very tricky to go from here to really push myself up without that other leg doing the work. So that's going to mean that from this bottom position, you hit your checkpoint, you assess again, and you say to yourself, okay, maybe I'm just going to put this foot down a little bit here to give me some extra support. Now I can start to drive up. Maybe I have to put my hand on here, little bit of support, and drive myself up. However, we got to remember one very important thing for the concentric phase of the lift, and that is that we're trying to work at our maximum strength capacity for the whole duration of that concentric phase, exactly like we're doing for the lowering phase. So lowering phase, we're aiming for 100% by actively trying to push ourselves back up, but gravity eventually winning that war. For the concentric phase of the lift, the easiest way to think about it is trying to hit failure at kind of like 10 points throughout the concentric phase. It could be 5, 10, 20, whatever you want to go for. The way we're going to do this, say we come down into our bottom position again, and I'm using this leg for a little bit more support. So I'm here, I can't get myself up out of the lift. In order to get myself up from here is over my strength capacity. So let's say I'm working at 100% to try and push myself up, but the ability I'd actually need, arbitrarily speaking, is like 120%, so I'm not quite there. Where do we find that 20% from? It's from the back leg. So if I use that back leg a touch, I can push myself up, but it's just that initial bit. I'm working 100%. Now, because of the difficulty of the strength curve of the lift, I've hit another block. I've hit that failure point where I can't push myself any further. All I can do is hold this isometric position if I just use this current force through the leg. So then I use that leg a little bit more, drive up, I can go a bit more. Now I've hit failure again. I've hit another checkpoint, another failure point, and I have to assess again, okay, what do I need to be working at 100% of my capacity without overdoing it and just flying up through the rep? So then maybe I need to use this hand an extra 5%, drive myself up through the strength curve. Now maybe here you get to a point where you don't actually need this support. We know the strength curve is kind of like an inverse bell shape. So in the middle of the lift, it's difficult. On either side, it gets easier and easier. So now maybe I can remove that hand. I can push up a little bit more. Now maybe here I can release that foot. Now I can push up all the way. And then the rep ends. You've been working at 100% of your capacity for the entirety of the lowering phase and then the entirety of the concentric phase, and you have just extrapolated out, this was meant to be a tutorial video and I'm knackered, all of your work at your strength threshold that you would ordinarily do in a conventional strength session across the space of an hour into 1 to 5 reps. And that's all you need for your knee flexion work. Once you're confident with that, you can maybe start to remove the weight plate or the ramp. You can start to bring that leg out in front, still holding on to things, but seeing how you do with this body weight lower. And then we can start to add weight to the equation in order to create more gravitational force that is pushing you down to further push you toward that 100% strength threshold on the way down. So if you can hold here, which a lot of you will be able to, we're going to need to add weight, and it's going to be a little bit tricky. You'll see in a second when I use my sandbag for it. The easiest thing would be to have a backpack that you put a weight plate in. The other thing you could do is hold on to a weight plate here, and that's just going to obviously change the distribution of the weight a little bit, having it in front. You could hold a dumbbell on one shoulder either side, maybe holding like the black weight bit here, the other black weight bit on your shoulder, and holding it like that. Gets a little bit tricksy. Or the optimal, which I'm not asking any of you to do just yet, is to get a weight vest and actually use that. A couple of technique tips for the single leg squat. Much like our bilateral squat, we're thinking of a slight external rotation at the hip, a slight knee drive outward. So the toes can face forward, but as we come down, some of you might feel, either due to instability or just some of the smaller muscles in and around the hip needing a little bit more development, you might feel that your knee caves in a little bit and you come into this side. Well, we can actively counteract that by switching on the muscle in the side of our hip, the glute medius, to almost twist like you're twisting a jar with your feet, like a monkey. Twist that jar open with your foot, and that's going to externally rotate this working leg at the hip. Then as you come down, you create a lot more stability than if we were to just go straight into it. There's much more instability there. So twist that jar open with the foot. You're kind of twisting your left foot, in this case counterclockwise. You get a lot more stability, and then you're trying to continue to drive that knee out. The other thing we're looking for is a slight hip hinge back. So instead of just starting the single leg squat and coming down like so, instantly creating flexion in the spine, what we want to do is send the butt back as we sit down. And that creates a little bit of hinge work, puts some of the load into the glute muscle, which is really important because that's such a big muscle that we want to use in the single leg squat. And it just takes some of the load out of the lower back so that the lower back isn't doing a ton of work to keep you upright and stable at the same time as your leg having to do work as well. So we just create a little bit more of an efficient movement pattern, sending the butt back to come down. I think I just swallowed a fly, rather than just going down like so and creating instant pressure and compression in the lower back.